female figure eight champion. And it's been so special because the first year that I raced, I sat down in my garage with my grandpa and I said, you know what? I want to be the first female figure eight champion. And he was the first nationals winner. He was the inaugural winner of the figure eight nationals at Evergreen Speedway. And that was another first for us. We became the first female figure eight champion of the nationals, and it was so special that right then and there, that's when I was like, now I want to be the first female to champion. So it's been so surreal. It's been incredible. There's like 9 of us among my family that race out there. You have the Wilkinson family, you have the Repin family, and you have the Deitz family, and my uncle Jamie Corbett. So it's been so incredible to just, when I was out there watching my grandpa, you never would have imagined that 25, 30 years later that it would amount to this and create a legacy of his entire family, coming together and meeting on a track. It's been pretty special, and I'm super proud of that.
How far back do you remember getting into racing?
So I actually started racing late in life. I started I started 8 years ago, but I've been at the track since I was about a week old.
So what was that? What's the your far back first memory of the track?
Oh, I would just say just going there for like the big races, watching figure eights, watching my grandpa race back in the day was kind of one of the best things, kind of what really got me, hooked with the racetrack and, just being there with my family and, just getting to meet all these wonderful and awesome people who turn into family. But I would just say I don't have a specific moment, but I know that the big, 60 Minutes of Fear, the big races, those are the ones that I remember the most.
What appealed to you about it? Is it being down in that final lap and then coming from behind and crossing the finish line first, or just simply going fast around the corners? What hooked you on that?
I think it was just all of it. Being there, having somebody to be able to watch, and somebody who did well. Back in the day when, I can remember at least going to the racetrack, they had, A, B, C, D mains. There were so many cars in the figure eight, kind of like in the class there, that it was always, you always wanted to see a wreck. You always wanted to see something happen there or close to. There were so many cars back in the day that's usually kind of where that happened. But, the thrill of going through the intersection, working with the rest of, the competitors, try to get as close as possible to put a show on for the fans, but not tear up our equipment, each and every weekend. And, the last few years we started winning, and absolutely when that white flag comes out and you see, you're in the first place or second place with the opportunity for a win, it's such a special feeling. And then being able to do it, in the same place that my family races is just, it's been incredible.
When you first got into, in the driver's seat, do you recall what that feeling was like, having watched it, but now your first time doing it? Do you remember what that experience was like?
I will never forget.
Okay.
I was terrified. I was terrified because I had never raced anything before. Usually when you grow up from a racing family, you start at a really young age. Well, I started later in life, and I had never raced anything before, really, go-karts, but I had never raced a car. And so just jumping in there, I would be sitting waiting to come out of the pits, and my legs would be shaking just in anticipation and just my nerves. And, I didn't want to let my family down. I didn't want to wreck anybody else. I wanted to do well. And that still holds true today. But yeah, I remember the first time going out, I was extremely nervous. I was worried about wrecking the car. My legs were shaking just sitting there before, going out to take the green. And then, as soon as you do get out there and the green flag drops, it all kind of goes away.
What's like the average speed of like the figure eight races? Like how fast you're going?
So I would say for our class, I mean, it's hard to know exactly. We have estimates and stuff, but, for our class, I would say it's around 60 miles an hour going through the intersection. Could be a little bit less, could be a little bit more just based on track conditions and car setup and things like that. But, yeah, I would say about, same speed as being on I-5.
Gotcha. Well, and that was my follow-up right there. I've always been curious, do racers have a tough time even just driving on the road, like going to get groceries? Must just be tedious to go that slow.
Yes and no.
Okay.
When I was younger, I used to get in a lot of trouble with getting pulled over. I sped a lot, and I had a lot of tickets for speeding. And when I first started racing, I realized that I got to take all that out on the track. And so now for my day job, I drive and work with dealerships, and so I like car dealerships. And so I drive every single day, from Bellingham to North Seattle. And for me, it's not that bad. The one thing that I do have a really hard time with is roundabouts. I am very impatient in roundabouts just because I race figure eight. I'm used to taking, a little bit of risk, and I get honked at a couple of times, but it's all in good fun.
Alrighty. So having your husband as part of your crew, I guess talk about what's that relationship like? Someone who's been there, done that. He's raced. He's won the championship a few times. So like, what's that camaraderie like when you and he are talking pre-race and then post-race? What's that relationship like?
My husband and I have a really good kind of thing going with the way that we work together. He does a lot of the work on the car, but I also, jump in and really just kind of anticipate what he needs, when we're not preparing for the race, or like when we're not, talking about what we're trying to do for the race. But really it's teamwork. He makes recommendations. He tells me where, what opportunities I have, or, what I need to watch out for. And then after the race, if we've done well, he's one of the first people to come up and congratulate me. It's such a special bond that we have in relationship because we just understand each other. If he says something, I know exactly what he means. Typically, he takes the time to explain things to me so I understand. When we're talking about what the car's doing or what it feels like, if I'm telling him what I think we need to change and make the recommendations, he takes that, in and listens to it. He doesn't, just say, oh, well, I'm looking at the car, it's doing something different than what you're saying. I mean, sometimes that happens too, but, we really communicate on, what the car is doing, how I'm feeling, what I think needs to be changed. And that's the biggest thing, for him and I is, being able to have that open communication. There's times where I've been like, hey, I want to try this change during a practice. And it was not the right direction, but he let me do it anyways. And what I gained from that is, I gained the knowledge and the feeling of what a car will do when something gets changed in that specific, let's say it's springs. The car handles differently. And so I was able to feel that. And now I can better relay to him, if there is something wrong or if something's going awry, I can communicate that better. And so just being able to allow me as a driver to be able to try things that I want to try or do things that I want to do, but also making recommendations with his experience of, things that I wouldn't know to even try and look at has been incredible.
Motorsports don't have large numbers of female drivers. Why do you think that is?
I don't know why. I don't know why it is. It is difficult trying to, be a female in a man's world. And, I've always just looked at it in a way, when I first started, my grandpa first sat me down and said, okay, you're going to be racing, but here's some things that you need to know. You're not going to, you're going to have some challenges. There's going to be people that might pick on you. You know, there's going to be people that think, you know, that you can't race because you are a girl or you don't have the ability or, you know, whatever. And I don't know why more women don't get into it. You know, we're extremely lucky here at Evergreen Speedway. We have a very large female competitive kind of competition within a lot of different classes. You know, there's myself, you have Haley Wilkinson, who runs in another class, you have the Benders, you have Constance, Jessica Wilkinson. There's so many other females that are running at Evergreen, and even in our youth class, you know, there's more females in our youth class than there are males this year, which is pretty incredible. And so just being able to watch the growth and, you know, see more people get involved and say, okay, yeah, I can do this. You know, yeah, it's hard and I'm going to have to learn a lot, and you know, it's going to be different than, you know, sports or something like that. But it's so amazing to see that more people are getting into it. You know, I think maybe people just have the stigma of, oh, racing is a guy's thing. You know, girls don't do that. I think differently.
Right.
I think that women can do, you know, and girls can do anything that a man can do and learn it. You know, we might not pick it up right away, or, you know, we might need to learn kind of the automotive side of stuff, but we have the same abilities just like everybody else is. And that's something that I've really tried to, you know, speak to the younger generation about is, you know, if you want to do it, you can do it.
Right.
And there's so many of the young generation in like the youth class right now that I talk to. And, you know, we had one of the girls who got into an accident earlier this year for her first race moving up to the youth class, and she just watching her grow from that, and just showing her and telling her, like, hey, you have this, you can continue to, you know, grow and learn. This is just part of it. You're gonna hit something at some point, you know, might as well get it out now. And it's just been absolutely incredible to watch Evergreen, you know, encourage young females, and encourage just the women in every class that's out there.
What stereotypes, I guess, have you heard? Maybe it's within just the racing community, or things that have been directly told to you, if you want to share some of those.
Oh, yeah, there's been a lot of controversy. You know, I've had people make fun of me because I, you know, would come to the track with lipstick on or wear makeup or, you know, whatever. But, you know, that's just who I am as a person. I still enjoy racing, and I can do that with lipstick. Like, that doesn't make a difference of my skills or not. You know, there's been that. I've had, you know, people say that because I'm a female, I'm not as aggressive, and, you know, I'm not going to learn it. My grandpa always said, you either have it, you don't, or you're just never going to get it. And, you know, I think that for me, there's just been a lot of noise, and that's just what I call it. You know, people can say what they want. I'm still, you know, I'm a female. I'm going to be me. I'm going to live my life, and I'm going to go out there and, you know, still do the best that I can every day. So it doesn't matter if I have lipstick or curls in my hair.
Right. What's your pre-race routine? I guess, you know, you wake up, what are you having to eat? What are you doing mentally to prepare? You know.
Yeah, wake up routine is I always have to have my coffee the beginning of the day. Usually it's protein coffee. You know, we get to the track early just to try and make sure, you know, that we can get our spot and everything's ready to go. I don't usually eat before race day, or the morning of race day. Maybe, you know, a small pastry or something like that, but I don't usually eat throughout the day just because my stomach still gets a little bit nervous throughout. But I do always make sure to have pickle juice.
Oh, really?
So that is something, especially on hot days. Yes. So the pickle juice definitely helps you, you know, stay hydrated because of the salt content, you know, without having to drink a ton of water. So pickle juice is always a thing. And then my husband is native, and so we always sage the car before every race. I make him do that. So it is just a thing. It's only weird if it doesn't work, but we do sage my car and myself before every race, just, making sure that, we stay safe and in one piece, and, just make sure that nothing bad happens.
You had finished, fourth the past few years, and then you actually were runner-up one of the years after 2020. But to finally win it, what was that feeling like when you crossed the finish line?
It was absolutely incredible. I always joke that I've always been a bridesmaid and never a bride. I've finished second and third a few times, but never, gotten that number one spot. And, we set up and had a position last year where we could have won it. We came out of the gate pretty strong. We won the first two races and then had a total of 5 wins last year. But unfortunately, we also had a few DNFs that took us out of the running. And so we did finish third last year, but this year we really just focused on getting to finish every race and doing the best that we can. And man, when I found out that we won the championship and just, we just needed to finish that night, it was absolutely incredible. I started crying because it was such an emotional moment. We have worked so hard, my family and my crew and I, and our sponsors to get there, and to be able to finally, clinch that title was so meaningful and just an absolute experience for sure.